Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be somewhere in Italy at this time, but Dominic has decided, yes, we'll record it. I just love Ayala's Angel and signed up for it the first day. Signing up was available. Okay, so we're doing chapters 1 to 13. Okay, next slide. Okay, it's interesting publication history. It's a late trollop. It was written between April 25th and September 24th, 1878, but there was a month-long sailing trip to Iceland in the middle of the summer of that. He had just completed earlier that year his trip to South Africa and published a 2-volume account. He just writes so much. It's written between John Caldigate and cousin Henry. It was turned down, interesting, by several publishers, and it wasn't published until June 1881 by Chapman and Hall. Critics were very lukewarm about it. That has been changing lately. He was 63. It's, one quote, the brightest book Trollope had written since the completion of the Barchester Chronicles. Yeah, next one. Okay, I thought it was interesting to see all the different views of her from different covers. She's supposed to have long, dark locks. And here we see different things of her, some being serious. The one in the middle seems totally not her, but next one, next set. Yeah, and so two of these, they have the two sisters. But again, I don't know if they're like I thought they would look. And then the third set, the one on the left is from Russia. And it is an interesting thing of Ayala. Certainly, it captures her dreaminess of being on a whale going out into outer space. And the second one is French. And so she looks very Frenchy. Okay, the next one. Okay. This novel is so different, and Dominic's going to have a great quote that emphasizes this. It has become critically orthodox to stress the pessimism of Trollope's art in his last decade. But the general reader who comes to Ayala's Angel without presuppositions will find exuberant romantic comedy underpinned by a calm and serious view of life and pervasive humor, which may be done broader, but which is surely never done better elsewhere in Trollope. And then the other interesting quote, and this is from the introduction to Oxford World Classics, I think 1986, Trollope explores the dignity and the potency of the dream world so many of us carry around with us. Okay, the next one. Okay, so we begin. First sentence. When Egbert Dormer died, he left his 2 daughters utterly penniless upon the world, and it must be said of Egbert Dormer that nothing else could have been expected of him. Okay, so this is the opening of the novel that follows the dark tale of John Caldigate. Since his later works have been described as on the dark side, are we in for another one? Since this novel begins with death? Oh no, on the contrary, we are in for a lively, sparkling, and very funny novel about 11 young people looking for love. Some for love, some for money. It begins like a fairy tale with 2 orphaned young women, Lucy 21 and Ayala 19, the daughters of this Egbert Dormer. They had been raised in an artsy household in South Kensington, quote, the most perfect bijou of a little house that might have been packed without trouble into the Tringles' dining room. Their father, a painter who had been accepted into the Royal Academy, presided over a home filled with books, music, art, lively conversation, and where imagination, beauty, and affectionate family ties were all important. But as mentioned before, he left his daughters penniless. Okay, the next slide. Okay, yeah, we won't kind of go through all of this, but there are 2 households of relatives who might take them in. The first is Uncle Reginald Dawson and Aunt Margaret of genteel poverty living in number 3 Kingsbury Crescent, Notting Hill, with no children. Reginald worked as a clerk in the Admiralty, but because of several financial setbacks, lived on a very limited income. The second household is the Tringles, the most wonderfully dysfunctional, humorous family in all of Trollope. Mr. Tringle, now Sir Thomas Tringle, is head of the banking firm of Travers and Treason, making and spending money like it was water. His wife is the older sister of Lucy and Ayala's mother. They have 3 children, Augusta, Gertrude, and Tom, and 3 residences, Queen's Gate, Merle Park, and Glenbogie in Scotland, end quote, and as many carriages and horses as would suit an archduchess. What a family. The 2 families agreed to each take one of the girls, Aunt Emmeline in her imperious manner claiming first choice, which is to be Ayala, the younger and brighter one, Ayala the romantic, Ayala the poetic. Aunt Emmeline had told Lucy that Aunt Dorset had chosen her, had chosen her, an obvious lie because Aunt Dorset had never even been consulted. Lucy knows a wide abyss is about to form between herself and Ayala, the 2 families' financial situations being so vastly different. But she is convinced that she can handle poverty better than Ayala can. Both sisters find it hard to part from each other. They have not only lost both parents, but now they are to lose each other. Neither household is like the one the 2 girls had grown up with. None of the adults ever seemed to consider what an adjustment it would be for the girls. Trollope begins with Lucy and the Dossets, the poorer and duller family. For all her self-assurance that she would be able to adjust and cope, Lucy found it so much harder in reality. Their relative poverty had taken its toll on Aunt Dosset, who had become somewhat hardened and overly preoccupied with strict economics. Lucy and she did not take to each other. Mending sheets, going to market, and making conversation, Lucy resisted all these things with a sullen, passive aggressiveness. Where were the books, the music, the beauty? Day after day were the same. But Lucy didn't realize at first that her presence was an added charge to the family budget, that meat, etc., would have to be stretched further. She had never come across such limits before, and in true Victorian wifely mode, Aunt Dosset made sure that Uncle Dosset still had his full share of meat and alcohol, except the alcohol has to be gin and water. But next slide. One good thing about Aunt Dosset was her encouragement of Lucy to get some physical exercise, to taking walks in Kensington Gardens. And I just love this quote. It is generally understood that there are raging lions about the metropolis who would certainly eat up young ladies whole if young ladies were to walk about the streets or even the parks by themselves. In London, there is a rising doubt under which before long, probably the lions will succumb altogether. Mrs. Dosset did believe somewhat in lions, but she believed also in exercise, and she was aware that the lions eat up chiefly rich people. And so Lucy goes and she eventually meets up with her former, though unspoken lover, Isidore Hamel, a young sculptor who had often visited her father. Okay, if Lucy was having a hard time adjusting, so was Ayala in the rich household, but for different reasons. She found the family over preoccupied with status, vulgar and full of self-importance, thoughts often found in the nouveau riche. The members she had the most trouble with were Augusta, the oldest, and Tom, the only son and heir. In all of these chapters, the characters bump up against each other, and few of their conversations are quiet and gentle. Rather, they're more likely to be lively sparring contests. So first we will do, I think it's the next slide, we will deal with Ayala's relationship with Augusta. Augusta, if you remember, Dr. Thorne, the oldest daughter, is also an Augustus, but she's nothing compared to how imperious this Augusta is. Okay. Augustus sees Ayala as inferior, likes to boss her around and make her do errands for her. This Ayala resents. In the household she grew up, there was a republic. Everybody was equal. It culminates one day in Ayala asking Augusta to do an errand for her. Then she is told that Augusta is engaged to be married and is not expected to perform errands for younger orphan cousins. The introduction of the Honorable Septimus Traffic, Augusta's fiance, is great comedy. When Augusta tried to explain to Ayala who he is, how important he is, she is exasperated by Ayala's response, especially when Ayala first sees him in person. And then we have the slide quote. She was never so surprised in her life as when she saw him. She had never yet had a lover of her own, but she had her own ideas as to what a lover ought to be. She thought Isidore Hamel would be a very nice lover for her sister. But the Honorable Septimus Traffic, it was a question, oops, typo, to her whether her Uncle Tringle would not have been better as a lover. He was somewhat bald, somewhat gray, somewhat fat. He was not particularly ugly, nor was he absurd in appearance. He's over 40, but Augusta makes him out to be less than that. And Augusta says, well, he'll be in government someday. And Ayala says, what, not yet? Then won't he be very old before he gets that? Perhaps he's not as old as he looks. But Augusta is furious. And this only makes her hate Ayala more. Okay, the next one. So before we go on, I think we need to talk about Ayala's view of men and her angel of light. I found this image online. I don't know, it looks, well, anyway. In the quote, put a couple of the quotes, her trying to explain it. Her problem is she can't explain it to her sister, her aunt, or to Tom. Her ideas at this moment about men were confined altogether to the abstract. She had floating in her young mind some fancies as to the beauty of love. That there should be a hero must, of course, be necessary. But in her daydreams, this hero was almost celestial, or at least ethereal. It was a concentration of poetic perfection to which there was not yet any appanage of apparel, of features, or of wealth. It was something out of heaven, which should think it well to spend his whole time in adoring her and making her more blessed than had ever yet been a woman upon the earth. And that hero must have wings tinged with azure. And the next is a continuation. Something else would come, something of which her castle building she had not yet developed the form, of which she did not yet know the bearing or the manner of its beauty or the music of its voice, but as to which she was very sure that its form would be music and its form would be beautiful, its voice full of music. So when she is accused, and we'll get to the next slide, in Rome of Augusta gets very jealous of Septimus' attention to Ayala. He and Ayala, not together, are invited to a ball. He's only going to stay half hour, but he stays till he brings her home at 3 in the morning. They walk up the steps at St. Peter's. Ayala kids him around a lot, and he takes it. And so Augusta is ready to break up. I mean, we're giving you 100. I don't know how to do a pound sign on my computer. Mr. Traffic is getting 120,000 pounds out of this marriage. And so when Augusta's jealousy gets really harsh and she thinks that she's going to cut it off, he thinks very highly, as do most men, and would have done much to keep it. But he feels like he also has to assert himself. My own one, he said, you are really making an ass of yourself. And they make up. But this contributes to the decision. One more factor, Will, that Ayala has to go. The other thing that happens in Rome is that Gertrude gets engaged to a penniless painter, Frank Houston, who thinks, whoo, maybe I can get 120,000 if I marry Gertrude, if that's how her father is. But the woes of Tom Tringle's unwanted attention to Ayala worsen. And okay, next slide. Okay, Tom had started his infatuation or his love for Ayala at Glenbogie up in Scotland in the fall when Ayala had hardly been in the family. Augusta had noticed and accused her of encouraging Tom, which really infuriated Ayala. But in Rome, he is much more aggressive. He traps her at the Colosseum and proposes. She wrote asking him to stop, but the letter only encouraged him more. He wrote back with a more definite proposal of marriage, and this is the letter she shows to Aunt Emmeline, who she thinks will protect her from Tom, but instead she accuses her of encouraging, and Ayala flares up and says, no, he's a lout, and then yells at her aunt for thinking that Ayala could possibly have encouraged such a lout as Tom. And Aunt Emily was horrified to conceive of this ungrateful young woman as her future daughter-in-law, the future wife of the heir to the Tringle estate. And the next slide I found online, actually it with was it Jim and Ellen .org, whatever, of I guess it's supposed to be Tom chasing her in the Colosseum. Okay, the next one. Okay. The way Augusta's dissatisfaction with her, Aunt Emmeline thinking Ayala is a real brat, they're changed. And we could go into that, but time is going. Tom is told he cannot visit, but that is until he convinces his father to approve the match. His father meets with Uncle Reginald, who agrees to let Tom try his hand again. Her Aunt Dawson encourages her to accept because it offers such economic security, and an orphan such as Ayala should consider how dependent a position, how her dependent position matters. But how could she make her aunt understand there could be no place in her heart for Tom Tringle, seeing that it was to be kept in reserve for some angel of light who would surely make his appearance in due season? But Tom does arrive, and this time, because he has his family's approval, at least his father, he's assumed Ayala will agree. He came in his plenitude of his rings. Ayala hated his jewelry. She was not quite distinct in her mind as to the raiment which should be worn by the angel of light when he should come, but she was sure he would not be chiefly conspicuous for gilding. So he tells her there'll be lots of money. I don't care about money. I'm in earnest. Well, so am I. He says, I mean to have you. You've got to do it. And so I tell you. And she says, nobody can make me. Okay, so Tom has to give up for a while. But then Uncle Tom is insistent. So he makes Aunt Emmeline come to visit, to get Ayala to come and visit them. I can't. If I come, it's a sign that I agree to marry him. He wouldn't, and Emily, he wouldn't eat you. Oh, it's worse than eating me. He will go on when I tell him not to. And then you'd tell me I encouraged him. And Aunt Emmeline is, Tom is too good for you. And she says, oh, I didn't say he wasn't. The Archbishop would be too good for me, but I don't want to marry him. Okay, next slide. And one of the quotes I realized possible sources of Tom's assurance is Sir Thomas said, then he shall have her. I made him a promise and I'm not going to give it up. I told them if he was in earnest, he should have her. Um, so I think Tom thinks he can get what he wants in the long run. Okay, next, we're kind of, I think, getting, okay. The just two more things. But one of the things is Sir Thomas has given Septimus Traffic all this money, but he's beginning to find that Septimus Traffic is a big hanger on, a big sponge. And he's going to have it out with him because they won't move out. So they're talking about different kinds of men, and Sir Thomas being, but among such, like Uncle Thomas, will occasionally be found one whose roughness does not altogether desert him, and who can on occasion use it with a purpose. But there are other men who, by the possession of imperturbable serenity, seem to be armed equally against rapier and bludgeon, whom there is no wounding with any weapon. Such a one was Mr. Traffic. It didn't matter how much you criticized him, it didn't get through. When you leave this, where are you and Augusta going to live? Well, we're doing pretty fine here. And I have to think of Augusta. Well, Augusta made up her mind, no doubt, to leave her father's house when she married. Oh, she shows affection for her parents by wishing to remain in it. So they kind of come to a compromise where the question will be, does Sir Thomas ever get rid of him? And I think the last point will be, okay. Diana Burke talked about this the other day too, and I just want to talk about trolloping castles in the air, because very much we see that Ayala lives with her castles in the air. But Victoria Glendinning, in her biography of him, says, people have this idea that he sits down at 5:30, writes for 3 hours, and that's it. But she wanted to say, but he did not sit down at his writing table with no preparation at all. He needed to dream his scenes and conversation into existence in solitude and silence. He elaborated each new castle on the air on solitary walks, just as he had in his boyhood. Walking in woods was best for this purpose. Best of all were the dark shadows of the Black Forest in Germany, where he could wander fancy-free. And I found this interesting because he wrote the last third or half or third of Ayala's Angel when he was staying with Rose in the Black Forest. So I think he has in his heart somebody like Ayala who does build castles. And lastly, there's just a few discussion questions. I mean, to me, the Tringle family is just so fascinating. I mean, how did they manage to get along as well as they do, given how different, self-important they each think they are? The division of the sisters, which household is better or worse for Lucy, for Ayala? And you might consider which one would you have wanted to go to? Ayala seems at once so spunky and so romantic at the same time. Can she survive the world that way? You might want to compare and contrast Aunt Emmeline and Aunt Margaret. And lastly, I don't know, I just put this down. How does the Honorable Septimus Traffic function as one of the most humorous characters in the novel so far? What does Sir Thomas find so difficult about him? One of the things, Augusta is so self-important that Trollope always refers to her after the marriage as the Honorable Mrs. Traffic. She's never Augusta anymore. She is, the title is there, and that's what she wants. Anyway, happy discussion and thank you for listening.